London, spring 1818. The spermaceti candles and oil lamps of Almack's assembly rooms cast a shimmering glow across polished marble floors, illuminating silk gowns and immaculate tailcoats as the cream of London society swirled through the cotillion. Miss Evangeline Harrington stood near the refreshment table, her gloved fingers wrapped around a glass of lemonade she had no intention of drinking, watching her fiancé Sir Philip Weston hold court with a group of older gentlemen near the card-room entrance. Having reached her 20th year, Evangeline understood with chilling precision what her future entailed. In 6 weeks, she would become Lady Weston, mistress of Weston Park in Hampshire, a role she had been groomed for since her father announced the betrothal 8 months prior. The arrangement had saved the Harrington estates from complete ruin, settled debts that would have destroyed her family's reputation and secured her younger sister's prospects. It was, by all accounts, an excellent match. Yet as Philip laughed at something Lord Bancroft said, his pale eyes flickering toward her with that proprietorial gleam she had come to recognize, Evangeline felt the heavy press in her chest that had nothing to do with her stays. If stories of forbidden love and courage against society's cruelest expectations move your heart, subscribe now and join us on this journey. You won't want to miss what happens next. The ballroom felt suffocating despite the cool April evening. Evangeline set down her glass and moved toward the terrace doors, seeking air that did not taste of duty and resignation. She had perfected the art of slipping away unnoticed over the past months, brief escapes that Philip endured only because they occurred under the watchful eyes of 300 witnesses. "Going somewhere, my dear?" Philip materialized at her elbow, his grip on her arm just firm enough to be controlling while appearing solicitous to observers. "The quadrille is about to begin. I've promised your hand to Lord Hargrove." "I need but a moment," Evangeline said softly, maintaining the pleasant expression she had learned to wear like armor. "The heat is rather oppressive." "Then I shall accompany you." His smile did not reach his eyes. "We must not risk rumors starting about my bride wandering unchaperoned, can we?" But fate, in the form of the Countess of Lindsay, intervened. The elderly woman descended upon Philip with the resolve of a sovereign army, her cane tapping imperiously against the floor as she demanded his immediate attention regarding some grievance about seating arrangements at a forthcoming dinner. Philip's jaw tightened, but even he could not dismiss a countess. 5 minutes, he told Evangeline, his tone brooking no argument. "No longer." She fled before he could reconsider, slipping through the terrace doors into the blessedly cool night air. The gardens beyond were lit by paper lanterns strung between trees, creating pools of golden light separated by welcoming shadows. Evangeline descended the stone steps and followed a gravel path toward the maze at the garden's far end, each step taking her further from the music and laughter that felt increasingly like mockery of her situation. She had almost reached the maze entrance when she saw him. A tall figure stood near the fountain, partially obscured by the reaching branches of a willow, the ember of a cheroot glowing in the darkness. Evangeline froze, propriety warring with the desperate need to not return immediately to the suffocating ballroom. The figure turned, moonlight illuminating strong features and eyes that seemed to assess her with surprising directness. "I beg your pardon," a deep voice said, the accent carrying the distinctive burr of the Scottish Highlands. "I did not realize the gardens were occupied. I shall remove myself." "No, please." The word escaped before Evangeline could stop it. "That is, the gardens are hardly private. I merely sought air." He stepped into a pool of lantern light, and Evangeline's breath caught. Lord Malcolm Sinclair, Duke of Strathmore, was a man spoken of in whispers at gatherings like these. Half Scottish, half English, he had inherited his title young and managed his estates with an iron efficiency that scandalized the ton almost as much as his refusal to remarry after his wife's death 4 years prior. He was, by all accounts, wealthy, powerful, and notoriously disinclined towards the pursuit of a suitable match that consumed London each season. He was also, Evangeline realized, with a flutter of something she could not name, strikingly favored. Dark hair fell across his forehead, styled with a certain negligence that defied the strict fashions of the time. His evening clothes were immaculate but worn with an ease that suggested he cared nothing for appearing perfectly groomed. And his eyes, gray as storm clouds, regarded her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "You flee the festivities as well," he observed. Not a question, but a statement. "I take it you find the company within as stifling as I do." Evangeline knew she should make her excuses and return to the ballroom. Everything about this situation was improper. She was betrothed, unchaperoned, speaking with a man notorious for his disregard of society's expectations. If Philip discovered her here, his anger would be formidable. Yet Evangeline answered, surprising even herself. Would it be unfortunate to confess one wishes a single evening might pass without feeling like a prize mare being examined for purchase? The Duke's laugh was low and genuine. Spoken like someone who understands the particular torture of these gatherings. He gestured toward a stone bench near the fountain. "I promise I am no threat to your reputation, Miss Harrington. I merely offer a few minutes of conversation between two people who would rather be anywhere else. You know my name." Evangeline moved toward the bench, propriety surrendering to the unprecedented freedom of honest conversation. The Countess of Lindsay was generous with information about the season's more notable betrothals. His tone suggested exactly what he thought of the Countess's gossip. "She seemed particularly eager to inform me that you are engaged to Sir Philip Weston, a man she described as quite wealthy despite his mercantile fortune." Evangeline could not suppress her smile. The Countess has opinions on everything, and most of them wrong, in my experience. He settled onto the opposite end of the bench, maintaining a respectful distance that somehow felt more intimate than proximity would have. "Tell me, Miss Harrington, are you marrying for love or duty?" The bluntness of the question should have offended her. Instead, Evangeline answered with equal honesty. "Duty. My father's investments proved less sound than anticipated. Sir Philip's fortune provided the solution to debts that would have destroyed us." A common enough story. Something in his expression suggested he understood more than he said. "And do you find happiness in this arrangement?" "I find security," Evangeline said carefully, "for myself and my family." That was not what I asked. Their eyes met across the shadowed space between them, and Evangeline felt her heart give a startling jolt. This stranger saw through the careful facade she had constructed, the performance of contentment she had perfected over 8 months of engagement. He saw, and he did not look away. "No," she whispered, "I do not find happiness." The admission hung in the air between them, dangerous and liberating. Malcolm leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to match hers. "Then perhaps, for this one evening, we might both pretend to be people capable of choosing their own paths. No duties, no obligations, merely two souls who happened upon each other in a garden." It was reckless. It was foolish. It was the most honest conversation Evangeline had experienced in longer than she could remember. "Very well," she said, and felt the first genuine smile in months curve her lips. "Tell me about Scotland, Your Grace. I have never traveled beyond England's borders." What followed was perhaps the most extraordinary hour of Evangeline's young life. They spoke of everything and nothing. Malcolm described the wild beauty of the Highlands, mountains that touched clouds and lochs that mirrored the sky. She told him of her love for painting, a passion her mother deemed acceptable only as accomplishment, never as true artistic pursuit. He admitted to reading poetry in secret, a weakness he shared with no one. She confessed her fear of being forgotten, of becoming merely an ornament in someone else's life. Time dissolved as they talked, the music from the ballroom a distant backdrop to revelations that felt both momentous and natural. Malcolm made her laugh with stories of his misadventures, learning to manage Highland tenants who viewed English lords with justified suspicion. She surprised herself by describing her frustration with endless rules that governed every moment of a lady's existence. "You have fire," Malcolm said at one point, his gaze intense. "I wonder if Sir Philip recognizes what he is trying to contain." "He recognizes that I am biddable," Evangeline replied, bitterness creeping into her tone. "That I will smile and obey and never cause scandal." What a terrible waste of spirit. The words resonated through her like cathedral bells. No one had ever suggested that her obedience might be anything but virtue. No one had ever implied she might be capable of more than dutiful compliance. "I should return," she said reluctantly, aware that far more than 5 minutes had passed. "Philip will be searching for me." Malcolm rose as she did, and for a moment they stood close enough that Evangeline could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, could catch the scent of sandalwood and something uniquely him. He reached out, hesitated, then gently brushed a stray curl from her cheek. The touch, even through his gloves, sparked a consuming heat through her. "If circumstances were different," he began, then stopped. "Forgive me. You are betrothed, and I have no right to such thoughts." "What thoughts?" The question emerged as barely a whisper. "That I should very much like to see you again." His hand fell away, but his eyes held hers. "That I find myself wishing I had met you before duty claimed you." Evangeline's heart hammered against her ribs. She should walk away. She should forget this conversation ever occurred. She should return to the ballroom and her fiancé and the future that had been decided for her. Instead, she said, "I walk in Hyde Park most mornings, during the promenade hour." It was not quite an invitation. It was not quite a promise. It was simply information, offered into the space between them where possibility still breathed. Malcolm's expression transformed, something fierce and tender simultaneously lighting his features. "Then perhaps I shall discover a sudden appreciation for morning constitutional walks." "Perhaps you shall." Evangeline forced herself to step back, to break the spell that had woven itself around them. "Good night, Your Grace." "Malcolm," he corrected softly. "When we are alone, I am simply Malcolm." "Then good night, Malcolm." She spoke his name like a secret, like a promise, like the beginning of something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She walked back toward the ballroom with measured steps, aware of his gaze following her until she disappeared through the terrace doors. For Evangeline, the heat and noise crashed over her like a wave, but she found herself smiling despite the certainty that she had just made a choice that could destroy everything. Philip found her moments later, his displeasure evident in the tightness around his mouth. "Where have you been? I have been searching everywhere." "The gardens," Evangeline said truthfully. "I needed air." "Alone?" His fingers wrapped around her elbow, not quite painful, but possessive. "We have discussed this, Evangeline. A woman in your position cannot afford even the appearance of impropriety." The narrator observed how Evangeline truly looking at him and wondered how she had ever convinced herself this was acceptable. Philip was handsome enough, wealthy certainly, and by society's standards an excellent match. But his eyes held no warmth when they rested on her, only the satisfaction of ownership. He did not see her fire. He saw only the acceptable shell she presented. "Indeed, I was alone," she lied, and felt no guilt for the deception. "Shall we return to the dancing?" The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of conversation she found meaningless and obligatory dances. But through it all, Evangeline was aware of Malcolm's presence across the ballroom. She felt his gaze like a physical touch, and twice their eyes met across the crowded space, sharing something that made her pulse quicken and her breath catch. When she finally returned home to the Harrington townhouse in Grosvenor Square, Lady Victoria Harrington, her mother, was waiting in the drawing room with the particular expression that promised interrogation. "You seemed distracted this evening," Lady Victoria observed, setting aside her embroidery. "Philip mentioned you disappeared for some time. I stepped outside for air." Evangeline removed her gloves with careful precision, not meeting her mother's sharp gaze. The ballroom was insufferably warm. The Duke of Strathmore was also noted to be absent from the ballroom at the same time. Lady Victoria's voice carried the dangerous calm that preceded storms. "I trust this was merely coincidence." Evangeline's hands stilled. "I do not know to what you refer." "Do not play foolish with me, child." Her mother rose, moving to stand before her. "The Strathmore family and ours have been rivals for 3 generations. That man's grandfather destroyed your father's uncle through unscrupulous commercial practices. If you were seen speaking with him, the scandal could destroy your betrothal." "I spoke with him briefly in the gardens," Evangeline admitted, seeing no point in complete denial. "It was entirely innocent." "Nothing involving Malcolm Sinclair is innocent." Lady Victoria's expression hardened. "He is known for his disregard of social conventions, for his refusal to remarry despite desperate mamas throwing their daughters at him for 4 years. He is dangerous, Evangeline, to your reputation and your future. You will avoid him entirely." "Yes, Mama." The words were automatic, learned obedience. But as Evangeline climbed the stairs to her bedchamber, she knew she would not keep that promise. Could not keep it. Something had awakened in her during that hour in the garden, something that whispered she might be capable of choosing her own path, even if that path led to ruin. The following morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for Hyde Park's promenade hour. Evangeline dressed with particular care, selecting a walking dress of pale blue muslin that her maid declared most becoming. Lady Victoria, fortunately, was occupied with planning a dinner party and did not question her daughter's desire for fresh air. Hyde Park, during promenade hour, was a carefully orchestrated social theater where the ton gathered to see and be seen. Evangeline walked Rotten Row with her maid trailing at a discreet distance, exchanging pleasantries with acquaintances, while her heart beat an unsteady rhythm against her ribs. She had nearly convinced herself he would not come when she saw him. Malcolm rode a magnificent black gelding, managing the spirited animal with an ease that spoke of years in the saddle. He wore riding clothes rather than morning dress, and several ladies turned to stare at him with barely concealed interest. Their eyes met across the path. He did not smile, but something in his expression made Evangeline's breath catch. Then he was guiding his mount toward her, and propriety demanded she acknowledge him. "Miss Harrington," he inclined his head with perfect correctness. "What a pleasant surprise to encounter you." "Your Grace." She curtsied, aware of curious eyes watching their interaction. "I hope you are enjoying the morning." "Immensely." His gaze held hers for a heartbeat longer than strictly proper. "Though I confess I find the park's beauty enhanced by present company." Heat crept into Evangeline's cheeks. "You are too kind." "I am rarely accused of kindness." A slight smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Honesty, perhaps. But kindness suggests a softness I have long since abandoned." They stood there, acutely aware of the gaze of the morning promenade, speaking words that meant nothing while their eyes communicated volumes. Evangeline was acutely aware that this moment would be dissected in drawing rooms across London by evening, that Lady Victoria would hear of it within hours, that Philip would be furious. She found she did not care. "I wonder," Malcolm said carefully, "if you might recommend a reliable jeweler. I find myself in need of a gift for my mother's birthday." It was a transparent excuse, but one that provided pretext for future meetings. Evangeline's maid stood too far away to hear their quiet conversation, and no one observing could object to such an innocent exchange. "Rundle and Bridge on Ludgate Hill are excellent," Evangeline said, her pulse leaping in anticipation. "I have occasionally visited their establishment on Wednesdays around 3 o'clock, to admire their work. Wednesday at 3. His eyes gleamed with understanding. I shall remember your recommendation. He tipped his hat and rode on, leaving Evangeline standing in the middle of Rotten Row with her heart hammering and her cheeks flushed. Around her, she heard the whispers beginning, speculation about what the Duke of Strathmore and the betrothed Miss Harrington might have discussed. Let them whisper, she thought with a defiance that surprised her. Let them speculate. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. The weeks that followed established a dangerous pattern. Wednesday afternoons at Rundle and Bridge, where they examined jewelry they had no intention of purchasing while speaking in careful half-truths. Morning walks in Hyde Park, always properly chaperoned, always maintaining the appearance of chance encounters. An evening at the theater where their boxes happened to be adjacent, allowing for whispered conversation during intermission. Each meeting fed the growing connection between them. Evangeline learned that Malcolm had loved his wife deeply, that her death in childbirth had nearly destroyed him, that he had sworn never to subject himself to such loss again. Malcolm, who had loved his wife deeply, had sworn never to subject himself to such loss again. He discovered that Evangeline painted landscapes that captured emotion rather than mere scenery, that she read philosophy in secret, that she dreamed of traveling to places she had only seen in books. They were careful, always careful, to maintain propriety's facade. But anyone watching could see the way Malcolm's eyes followed Evangeline across ballrooms, the way her face transformed when he entered a room, the connection that crackled between them like summer lightning. Philip noticed. He began arriving earlier to collect her for outings, restricting her movements, questioning her whereabouts with increasing frequency. Suspecting the deepening attachment, he demanded they accelerate the wedding date, citing his eagerness to begin their life together, though Evangeline suspected his true motivation was possessiveness. Lady Victoria noticed as well. She issued ultimatums and threats, reminding Evangeline of her duty to family, of the debts that would crush them if the betrothal was broken. She spoke of the scandal that would ruin her younger sister's prospects, of the shame that would follow them for generations. But across drawing rooms and through theater crowds, Malcolm's gray eyes promised something her mother could never understand. Freedom. Choice. A life lived on her own terms, even if society condemned her for it. It was Lady Genevieve Somerset who transformed their careful dance into catastrophe. Lady Genevieve Somerset had been Malcolm's mistress years before his marriage, and rumor suggested she had never quite accepted their affair's end. Now, watching Malcolm's attention fixed on a plain girl engaged to someone else, her wounded pride transformed into calculated malice. She found an ally in Philip Weston, who shared her desire to separate Malcolm and Evangeline, though for entirely different reasons. What began as chance conversation at a musicale evolved into conspiracy, fueled by jealousy and possessiveness in equal measure. The trap was baited with an invitation. Lord Blackburn, whose estate straddled the border between Scotland and England, announced plans for a fortnight of festivities celebrating his daughter's coming out. The invitation extended to several prominent families, including the Harringtons, Sir Philip Weston, the Duke of Strathmore, and Lady Genevieve Somerset. Lady Victoria initially declined, citing the impropriety of such close proximity between Evangeline and Malcolm. But Philip convinced her otherwise, arguing that chaperoned country gatherings were far safer than London's secretive corners. What he did not mention was his agreement with Genevieve to manufacture a scandal that would destroy any possibility of Malcolm and Evangeline's connection. The Blackburn estate in the Scottish Highlands was magnificent, all ancient stone and sweeping vistas. Mountains rose like cathedral spires beyond manicured lawns, and a dark loch stretched to the horizon like a mirror reflecting clouds. For Evangeline, stepping into this landscape felt like walking into one of Malcolm's descriptions, beauty so fierce it stole breath. The fortnight's activities were carefully planned, shooting parties for gentlemen, afternoon teas for ladies, elaborate dinners each evening, and excursions to explore the surrounding countryside. It was during these group outings that Evangeline and Malcolm found stolen moments, brief exchanges under the guise of casual conversation, glances that communicated what words could not. On the 5th day, a riding party was organized to visit a particularly scenic overlook. 24 guests set out in the crisp morning air, following paths that wound through pine forests and across heather-covered moors. Malcolm rode near the front of the group, Evangeline toward the middle, carefully separated by Lady Victoria's vigilant chaperoning. But weather in the Highlands was notoriously unpredictable. Without warning, thick fog rolled down from the mountains, transforming the landscape into an impenetrable gray wall. Visibility vanished within minutes. Horses whinnied nervously as riders called to each other, voices muffled by the dense mist. In the confusion, Evangeline's mare spooked at something unseen, bolting off the main path into undergrowth. By the time Evangeline regained control, the fog had swallowed every sight and sound of the riding party. She called out, receiving no response save the muted echo of her own voice. Panic clawed at her throat. The forest pressed close, unfamiliar and suddenly hostile. She dismounted, leading her trembling mare carefully through trees she could barely distinguish from fog. Isolation pressed upon her with every step. Then, through the gray, she heard hoofbeats. "Evangeline!" Malcolm's voice carried the edge of fear. "Call out if you can hear me." "I am here!" she shouted with all her strength. He materialized from the fog like some Highland legend, his dark horse appearing solid while everything else remained ghost-like. Relief transformed his features when he saw her, and he was off his mount in seconds, striding toward her with single-minded purpose. Thank God! His hands gripped her shoulders, his eyes scanning her for injury. "Are you hurt?" "No, merely lost." She found herself trembling, though whether from fear or his proximity she could not say. "I cannot see the path. Nor can anyone in this damned fog." He looked around at the impenetrable mist. "We must find shelter and wait for it to clear. There is a hunting cottage not far from here, if I can locate it." Leading both horses, Malcolm guided them through the forest with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with Highland weather and ground. 20 minutes of careful progress brought them to a small stone building, barely more than a shepherd's hut, but solid and dry. He pushed open the weathered door, gesturing her inside. The cottage interior was simple. One room with a stone fireplace, a rough wooden table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed frame with ancient blankets. Small windows admitted gray light that did nothing to illuminate the shadows. It smelled of peat smoke and aged wood, isolated from the world beyond its walls. Malcolm moved immediately to the fireplace, where previous occupants had left kindling and peat. Within minutes, he had a fire crackling, orange light pushing back the gloom and providing warmth against the damp chill. He tended the horses next, settling them in a lean-to attached to the cottage's side, before returning to where Evangeline stood near the flames. "The fog will lift," he said, though his expression suggested hours rather than minutes. "The others will search for us once it clears enough." They were alone, completely, utterly alone for the first time since that night in the London garden 6 weeks past. No chaperones, no watchful eyes, no society dictating their every movement. Just the two of them in a hunting cottage while fog erased the world beyond. Evangeline should have been frightened. Her reputation, already precarious, hung by a thread. If anyone discovered them here, the scandal would be absolute. Philip would break the engagement. Her family would be ruined. She would be ostracized from society, condemned as a fallen woman. Yet all she felt was a strange sense of rightness, as if every moment since that night at Almack's had been leading to this. "You should sit," Malcolm said, dragging one of the chairs closer to the fire. "You are shivering." She had not realized she was cold until he mentioned it. Evangeline sank into the offered chair, watching as Malcolm shed his riding coat and draped it around her shoulders. The garment held his warmth and scent. wrapping her in an intimacy that made her heart race. He took the opposite chair, maintaining a careful distance despite their isolation. For long minutes, they sat in silence, watching flames dance while fog pressed against the windows like something alive. "We should not be here," Evangeline finally whispered. "No," Malcolm agreed. "We should not. If they find us like this, I will be ruined." "Yes. Philip will never forgive me." "One can only hope." The dry humor in his voice made her look up, and she saw him watching her with an intensity that stole breath. "Forgive me. That was unworthy. But I confess I find it difficult to regret circumstances that give me these hours with you. These hours that will destroy everything." Evangeline knew she did not regret it either. How could she, when every moment with Malcolm felt more real than the life she had been living? "Then let us not waste them on fear." He leaned forward, firelight casting shadows across his face. "Tell me truthfully, Evangeline, do you love Sir Philip Weston?" The question was improper, presumptuous, dangerous. She should refuse to answer, should maintain the pretense of dutiful affection for her betrothed. But in this cottage, with fog erasing the world and Malcolm's gray eyes demanding honesty, she found herself incapable of lies. "No," she said simply. "I do not love him. I doubt I could ever love him." "Does he love you?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "Philip loves my obedience. He loves that I will smile and nod and never challenge him. He loves the idea of me as ornament to his success. But love me as a person? No, I do not believe he is capable of such emotion." "Then why marry him?" Malcolm's voice was gentle but relentless. "Why consent to a life devoid of passion or affection?" "Because my family needs his money." The words tasted like ashes. "Because my father made poor investments and gambled away our security. Because my younger sisters deserve their seasons and good marriages. Because duty demands sacrifice, and I am the eldest daughter." Duty. He spoke the word like a curse. "I understand duty, Evangeline. I have been Duke of Strathmore since I was 23 years old. I have managed estates and tenants and endless responsibilities for 11 years. I know what it means to sacrifice personal desire for obligation." "Then you understand why I must marry Philip. I understand why you believe you must." He rose from his chair, moving to stand before the fire, his back to her. "But I wonder if you have considered that there might be another way." "What other way exists?" Evangeline stood as well, drawn toward him despite knowing she should maintain distance. "My father's debts are real. Philip's money is the only solution we have found." "Money is not the only power in England." Malcolm turned to face her, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. "A duke has considerable influence. Debts can be settled through means other than marriage. Investments can be arranged, futures can be secured." A cold, fierce tide of realization washed over her. "You are suggesting you would pay my father's debts." "I am suggesting," he said carefully, "that if the only obstacle to your happiness is money, then perhaps that obstacle is not insurmountable." "And in exchange?" Her voice emerged barely above a whisper. "What would you expect in return for such generosity?" His eyes held hers, fierce and tender simultaneously. "Nothing you do not wish to give freely." He moved closer, closing the space between them until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "But I confess I have a hope, reckless and impossible though it may be." "What hope?" "That you might choose differently than duty demands." His hand rose to cup her cheek, the touch feather-light, reverent. "That you might choose to be happy instead of acceptable. That you might choose me." Evangeline's breath caught in her throat. His touch burned through her, igniting something she had spent months trying to ignore. "I barely know you." "You know me better than anyone in London." His thumb traced her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. You know that I read poetry in secret. You know that I walk in gardens to escape suffocating ballrooms. You know that I see you, truly see you, not as ornament or obligation, but as a woman capable of so much more than society allows. Malcolm. His name emerged as a plea, though for what she could not say. I loved my wife, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. When she died, I swore I would never permit myself to care so deeply again. For 4 years I have kept that vow. I have refused every matchmaking mama, declined every dinner invitation designed to parade eligible daughters. I have been cold, remote, exactly as the Tun describes me. And now? Now I find that some things cannot be controlled through will alone. His other hand came up to frame her face, holding her as if she were something precious and fragile. You have undone every defense I constructed, Evangeline. You have made me want things I thought I had buried with my wife. You have made me believe that perhaps love is worth the risk of loss. Tears pricked her eyes. You cannot mean this. I have never meant anything more in my life. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. I am offering you a choice, not duty, not obligation, a genuine choice. Marry Philip and be miserable but socially acceptable. Or take a chance on a scarred Scottish duke who will love you with everything he has, who will give you freedom and respect and partnership, even if society condemns us both. The moment focused entirely on his gray eyes, to his hands cradling her face, to the thundering of her heart against her ribs. This was the moment that would define the rest of her life. She could step back, return to London, marry Philip as planned. She could be dutiful, acceptable, slowly suffocating under the weight of propriety. Or she could choose courage, choose truth, choose love. Kiss me, she whispered. Malcolm went utterly still. Evangeline, if I kiss you, there will be no returning to how things were. If I kiss you, I will fight for you with everything I have. I will destroy Philip Weston's claim to you. I will weather every scandal, face every challenge, pay any price to make you mine. Not then kiss me, she said again, her voice stronger. Kiss me, and damn the consequences. His restraint gave way. His mouth claimed hers with a consuming hunger that stole her breath, years of loneliness and denied longing pouring into the kiss. Evangeline gasped against his lips, her hands fisting in his shirt as sensation overwhelmed thought. She had been kissed before, chaste pecks Philip occasionally bestowed like favors. But this was nothing like those bloodless contacts. This was fire and need and connection so profound it felt like recognition. Malcolm kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, like she was salvation and he was lost. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her against the solid warmth of his body, and Evangeline melted into him with a surrender that should have terrified her, but instead felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Malcolm rested his forehead against hers. I am completely, utterly lost, he murmured. Then we shall be lost together. Evangeline's fingers tangled in his hair, drawing him back for another kiss, slower this time, but no less intense. They lost track of time in that cottage, wrapped in each other's arms as the fire burned low and fog pressed against the windows. They spoke in whispered confessions between kisses, sharing dreams and fears and futures that seemed suddenly possible. Malcolm described the life he could offer her, freedom to paint and read and be herself without the suffocating constraints of London society. Evangeline imagined waking each morning in his arms, exploring the wild Highland beauty he described with such passion, building a life based on genuine partnership rather than duty. But in the back of her mind, she felt the ominous press of the hour and the certain fact that the others would soon be seeking them. When his lips trailed from her mouth to her jaw, then lower to the sensitive skin of her neck, Evangeline arched into him with a soft sound that made him groan. His hands roamed her back, her waist, stopping just short of impropriety even as their kisses grew more heated. Some part of her, The proper young lady trained since birth whispered that she should stop this, that she was already too compromised. But the larger part, the part that had awakened in a London garden weeks ago, wanted more. "We should stop," Malcolm murmured against her throat, though his hands said otherwise. "You deserve better than a cold cottage and a man too desperate to maintain control." "I deserve to choose," Evangeline countered, tilting his face up to meet his gaze. "And I choose you. I choose this. I choose a life where I am loved rather than owned." His expression transformed into something fierce and tender. "Then I am yours," he said simply, "for as long as you will have me. Through scandal and society's condemnation, through whatever storms we must weather. I am yours, Evangeline Harrington, and I will spend the rest of my life proving worthy of your choice." They kissed again, sealing the promise, two souls choosing each other despite impossible odds. Outside, the fog began to thin, gray giving way to patches of blue sky. Soon, the search parties would find them. Soon, they would face consequences neither could predict. But in that moment, in that cottage with fire crackling and hearts beating in synchrony, they were simply two people who had found in each other something worth fighting for. When voices finally called through the dissipating mist, they separated reluctantly. Malcolm's fingers lingered on Evangeline's face one last moment before propriety demanded distance. They emerged from the cottage to find Lord Blackburn and half the riding party, relief transforming quickly to speculation as they noted the flushed cheeks, the disheveled clothing, the intimacy that hung in the air like perfume. Lady Victoria's expression promised fury. Philip Weston's cold eyes calculated opportunity in disaster, and standing slightly apart, Lady Genevieve Somerset wore a smile of pure triumph. The ride back to the estate occurred in tense silence. Evangeline was separated from Malcolm, placed under her mother's watchful eye while rumors spread through the party like wildfire. By the time they reached Blackburn House, servants were already whispering, guests exchanging knowing glances, scandal blooming like poisonous flowers. That evening, Lady Victoria confronted her daughter in Evangeline's assigned bedchamber, rage barely contained beneath icy composure. "You have ruined us," she hissed. "Utterly, completely ruined us. Whatever happened in that cottage, everyone assumes the worst. Philip is demanding an immediate explanation. The Countess of Lindsay is already spreading tales across 3 counties." "Nothing happened," Evangeline said, the lie tasting bitter. "The fog separated us from the group. We took shelter, that is all." "That is all?" Lady Victoria's laugh was harsh. "You were alone with a man for hours. Your hair was disordered, your lips were swollen. Even if nothing occurred, which I do not believe, society will assume complete ruin." "Then society's assumptions are not my responsibility." Evangeline lifted her chin, channeling the courage Malcolm's love had awakened. "I will not be condemned for seeking shelter from dangerous weather." "Philip is being remarkably generous," her mother continued, as if Evangeline had not spoken. "Despite this disaster, he still offers marriage. But he demands it occur within the week, before further scandal can develop. We will return to London tomorrow and make immediate arrangements." "No." The word emerged clear and strong. Lady Victoria stared as if her daughter had sprouted horns. "What did you say?" "No, I will not marry Philip Weston." Evangeline's heart pounded, but her voice did not waver. "Not in a week, not ever. I do not love him. I will never love him. And I refuse to condemn myself to a lifetime of misery for the sake of social acceptance." "You refuse?" Her mother's voice dropped to dangerous quiet. "You have no choice, Evangeline. Your father's debts must be paid. Your sister's futures depend on this marriage. You cannot simply refuse." "I can, and I do." Evangeline moved to the window, looking out at Highland Mountains silhouetted against the evening sky. "There are other ways to address Father's financial troubles. Ways that do not require me to sacrifice my entire life. Understanding dawned in Lady Victoria's eyes. "The Duke of Strathmore. He has made you promises." "He has offered me choice," Evangeline corrected, "something no one else has done." "Choice?" Her mother's laugh was bitter. "What choice does a ruined woman have? If you break this engagement, you will be ostracized. No respectable man will ever offer for you. You will drag your entire family down with your disgrace. Then perhaps respectability is not worth the price." Evangeline turned to face her mother, seeing for the first time not authority, but fear. Lady Victoria was terrified, not of scandal itself, but of losing control, of a daughter who refused to be molded into society's acceptable shape. "I know you cannot understand, but I will not marry Philip. And if that makes me ruined in society's eyes, then so be it." Before Lady Victoria could respond, a sharp knock interrupted. A servant entered with a message for Evangeline, sealed with the Strathmore crest. Her mother snatched it before Evangeline could reach it, breaking the seal with trembling fingers. Her face went pale as she read. "He is settling father's debts," she whispered. "All of them. He has already contacted our solicitors, arranged for immediate payment of every penny owed. He writes that the Harrington family will be financially secure within a fortnight, regardless of any marital arrangements." Evangeline's breath caught. Malcolm had moved faster than she imagined possible. He had not waited for her answer, had not demanded promises in exchange for his help. He had simply acted, removing the financial pressure that had trapped her, giving her genuine freedom to choose. "He is trying to buy you," Lady Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Trying to steal you from Philip. He is giving me the ability to choose my own future." Evangeline retrieved the letter from her mother's nerveless fingers, scanning Malcolm's bold handwriting. The message was brief, formal, carefully worded to avoid impropriety. But beneath the proper phrases, she read his love, his determination, his unwavering support for whatever decision she made. "I will not marry Philip," she said again, "and neither you nor father can force me. The debts will be paid. My sister's futures are secure. There is no reason for this marriage except a social contract I never agreed to in my own heart." Lady Victoria sank into a chair, defeat written across her features. "You are making a terrible mistake," she said, but without heat. "Society will never forgive you." "Perhaps," Evangeline agreed, "but I will forgive myself, and that matters more." The confrontation with Philip occurred the following morning. He requested a private audience in Lord Blackburn's library, propriety maintained by the presence of Lord Blackburn himself and Evangeline's father, Lord Harrington. Malcolm, uninvited but undeterred, stationed himself outside the door, his presence both threat and promise. Philip stood by the fireplace, his expression carefully controlled, but fury simmering beneath. "I have been exceedingly patient," he began without preamble. "Despite yesterday's scandal, despite your increasingly inappropriate behavior with the Duke of Strathmore, I have maintained my offer of marriage, but my patience has limits, Evangeline." "Then perhaps your patience has reached its end," she replied calmly, channeling Malcolm's strength. "Because I cannot marry you, Philip. I am deeply sorry for any pain this causes, but I do not love you. I will never love you. And I cannot condemn us both to a marriage built on obligation rather than genuine affection." "Love?" Philip's laugh was contemptuous. "Affection is welcome, Miss Harrington, but love is an impertinence in an arrangement of this gravity. Marriage is a business arrangement, a merging of resources and names. Love has nothing to do with it." "Then we disagree on the fundamental purpose of marriage." Evangeline folded her hands, maintaining composure despite her racing heart. "You deserve a wife who views the institution as you do. I am not that woman." "You are confused," Philip said, his tone patronizing. "The Duke of Strathmore has filled your head with dangerous fancies. But once we are married, once you are removed from his influence, you will see reason." "I am not confused. I am, perhaps for the first time in my life, entirely clear. She looked at her father, who had remained silent throughout. Papa, I know this is not what you wished, but I cannot do this. Not even for you. Lord Harrington appeared suddenly burdened by profound age. The debts, he began. Are being addressed, Evangeline interrupted gently. The Duke of Strathmore has arranged payment. Our family will be secure. At what price? Philip's voice sharpened. You think his generosity comes without expectation? He is buying you, Evangeline, purchasing you away from me like you are goods to be traded. He is giving me freedom to choose. Evangeline lifted her chin. Something you never did. Because I recognize that women are too easily swayed by emotion to make such decisions. Philip's mask slipped, revealing the controlling nature he had previously concealed beneath courtesy. They are emotional, irrational, requiring firm guidance from men of stronger character. I have been patient with your foolishness, but my tolerance ends now. You will marry me within the week, or I will ensure that every door in London society closes to you and your family. No, Evangeline said simply. I will not. Then you are a fool. Philip moved toward her, Lord Blackburn rising in alarm. You choose scandal and ruin over security and respect. You choose a man who will discard you once he has had his fill over someone willing to provide lifelong protection. I choose love over fear, Evangeline countered, rejecting to step back despite Philip's threatening proximity. I choose a partner over a master. I choose possibility over certainty, even if that possibility includes scandal. The door swung open before Philip could respond, Malcolm entering with the controlled power of a storm barely contained. I believe the lady has made her position clear, he said, his Scottish burr more pronounced. Perhaps it is time to accept her decision with the grace of a gentleman. This is none of your concern, Strathmore. Philip's hands clenched into fists. This is between my betrothed and myself. She is not your betrothed. Malcolm's voice dropped to something dangerous. She has refused you, multiple times. That makes her a free woman, and any further harassment constitutes ungentlemanly behavior. Harassment? Philip laughed, the sound ugly. I am attempting to save her from her own foolishness. Something you, who have obviously seduced her with pretty words and false promises, would not understand. Choose your next words carefully, Malcolm said softly, but something in his tone made Philip step back. Because if you impugn the lady's honor again, we will settle this matter in a manner not conducive to your continued good health. Are you challenging me? Philip's voice rose. You would threaten violence over a woman who has already proven herself of questionable virtue? Malcolm moved then, crossing the space between them so quickly, Philip had no time to react. He did not strike, though his fists ached to do so. Instead, he leaned close, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried none the less. I am warning you, once, you will leave this house today. You will not contact Miss Harrington again. You will not spread rumors or attempt to damage her reputation, and if I hear that you have done any of these things, I will destroy you. Not physically, though God knows I am tempted, but socially, financially, completely. I have that power, Weston, and I will use every bit of it to ensure you regret the day you ever thought to control a woman who is worth 10 of you. The room fell silent. Lord Blackburn watched with barely concealed satisfaction. Lord Harrington appeared torn between relief and terror. Philip stood frozen, recognizing in Malcolm something he could not fight. Absolute conviction, backed by the resources and will to act upon it. This is not finished, Philip finally managed, but his voice lacked certainty. It is finished, Malcolm said calmly. Philip left the library with what dignity he could muster, which was little. Lord Blackburn excused himself shortly after, giving Evangeline and Malcolm a moment of privacy her father seemed too weary to deny. Thank you, Evangeline said when they were alone, her father having stepped to the window in deliberate blindness. For your support, for your intervention, for everything. I did only what you had already done yourself, Malcolm replied, maintaining a proper distance despite every instinct demanding he pull her into his arms. You chose freedom. I merely ensured that choice was respected. The scandal will be terrible, she warned. My mother is right about that much. Society will condemn us both. Let them condemn. His eyes held hers, gray as storm clouds and just as fierce. I have faced worse than wagging tongues and closed doors, and I will face it gladly if it means spending my life with a woman who chooses courage over acceptance. I do choose you, Evangeline said softly. Scandal and all, ruin and all. I choose you, Malcolm Sinclair, and I will not regret that choice. Then I am the most fortunate of men. He reached for her hand, propriety stretched, but not quite broken by their circumstances. We will weather this storm together, and on the other side, I promise you a life worth every moment of difficulty we must endure. The return to London occurred 2 days later, the Harrington family traveling in tense silence while rumors outpaced their carriage. Lady Victoria maintained icy disapproval, but Lord Harrington, freed from crippling debt by Malcolm's generosity, seemed unable to maintain righteous anger at his daughter. Her younger sisters, Imogen and Cordelia, oscillated between shock at their elder sister's rebellion and excitement at the dramatic romance of it all. Philip had indeed left for London ahead of them, and true to form, had begun spreading his version of events. But he had not anticipated Lady Genevieve Somerset's jealous nature turning against him rather than Malcolm. The explosion occurred at a ball thrown by the Duchess of Hertford 3 weeks after their return. Evangeline, no longer formally betrothed, but not yet officially courted by Malcolm, attended with her family. Philip was present as well, having convinced enough of his cronies that he was the injured party deserving sympathy. Whispers followed Evangeline through the ballroom, some pitying, some contemptuous, none kind. Malcolm arrived late, making an entrance that silenced conversation. He was dressed impeccably, his title and bearing radiating authority that even the most critical matron could not dismiss. He crossed directly to where Evangeline stood with her mother, bowing with perfect correctness before Lady Victoria. "My lady," he said formally, "I wonder if I might have the honor of a dance with your daughter." It was a public declaration, a line drawn before the entire ton. Lady Victoria's lips compressed, but she could not refuse without creating worse scandal. She inclined her head in reluctant permission. Malcolm led Evangeline onto the floor as the orchestra began a waltz. His hand settled at her waist, proper and possessive simultaneously, and they moved through the first steps in silence while 300 pairs of eyes watched. "You are causing quite the spectacle," Evangeline murmured. "I intend to cause more." His expression remained composed, but something in his voice suggested anticipation. "Watch the door. Our co-conspirator should arrive shortly." Before Evangeline could question, a commotion erupted at the ballroom entrance. Lady Genevieve Somerset swept in, her color high, her eyes bright with purpose. She was escorted by a gentleman Evangeline did not recognize, but whose presence seemed to agitate Philip where he stood conversing with Lord Bancroft. "Who is that?" Evangeline asked. "Lord Richard Pemberley, Genevieve's cousin. And more importantly, a man with no tolerance for those who use his family for nefarious purposes." Malcolm's smile was cold. It seems Genevieve discovered something interesting while examining correspondence in Philip's study during a recent visit. What happened next was the scandal that would be discussed in drawing rooms for years to come. Genevieve, heartbroken and vindictive in equal measure, had discovered letters between Philip and his mistress, a married woman with whom he had been conducting an affair throughout his engagement to Evangeline. More damning still were notes between Philip and Genevieve herself, not romantic but conspiratorial, planning the accident that would compromise Evangeline with Malcolm and force a hasty marriage. Genevieve, confronted by her cousin with evidence of her participation in the plot, had made a calculated decision. If she could not have Malcolm, At least she could destroy the man who had used her for his schemes. And perhaps in some twisted way, she could prove to Malcolm that she was capable of redemption. She stood before the assembled ton and, in a clear voice that carried to every corner, detailed Philip's perfidy. She read from letters that left no doubt of his affair. She described the plot to compromise Evangeline. She admitted her own participation and painted herself as a woman blinded by jealousy who now sought to correct a terrible wrong. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Philip denied everything, but Lord Pemberley produced witnesses, servants who had seen Philip with his mistress, who had overheard conversations about accelerating the wedding to prevent Evangeline's attachment to Malcolm from deepening. The evidence was overwhelming, devastating, and utterly complete. Philip's carefully constructed reputation crumbled in the span of 30 minutes. He left the ball in disgrace, his protestations falling on ears no longer willing to believe. The ton, always eager to side with the dramatically revealed truth, turned their sympathy to Evangeline, who had narrowly escaped marriage to a deceitful scoundrel. Malcolm, by protecting her from such a fate, transformed from a scandalous libertine to a romantic hero. In the aftermath, as guests whispered and stared, Malcolm led Evangeline from the ballroom into the relative privacy of the Duchess's garden. Other couples strolled the paths, but Malcolm found a bench partially concealed by rose bushes where they could speak without being overheard. "You planned that," Evangeline said, not quite accusatory. "You and Genevieve. I convinced her that revenge against the man who used her was more satisfying than futile pursuit of me," Malcolm admitted, "and that redemption, even partial, was worth the social cost." She agreed, though I suspect her primary motivation was genuine fury at Philip's manipulation. "She will be ostracized," Evangeline observed. "Her admission of conspiracy will not be easily forgiven." "No," Malcolm agreed, "but she made that choice with full knowledge of the consequences, and I have arranged for her to retire to her family's estate in Scotland, where the scandal will matter less. It is the best I could offer for her assistance." Evangeline studied his face in the moonlight, seeing the calculated strategy that had orchestrated Philip's downfall. "You are ruthless when protecting what you value." "I am ruthless when protecting you," he corrected, "and I will offer no apologies for ensuring that man could never harm you again." A smile tugged at her lips. "I should probably disapprove of such Machiavellian tactics." "But you do not." It was not a question. "No," she admitted, "I do not. Though I confess I am somewhat alarmed to discover I find your protective ruthlessness attractive." His laugh was low and genuine. "Then we are well matched, my fierce Evangeline, because I find your courage in the face of society's condemnation equally appealing." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the music from the ballroom drifting through the garden on a spring breeze. Around them, roses bloomed, their sweet scent mingling with the night air. It was a moment of peace before the storm that would undoubtedly continue. "What happens now?" Evangeline finally asked. Malcolm turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "Now I do what I should have done weeks ago. Now I ask you, properly and publicly, if you will do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife. Not because of scandal or obligation or financial arrangement, but because I love you, because I cannot imagine my life without you in it, because you are the most extraordinary woman I have ever known, and I want to spend the rest of my days proving myself worthy of your courage." Tears pricked Evangeline's eyes. "You do not need to prove anything." "Then say yes," he urged. "Say yes, and let us build a life together. In Scotland when you wish for freedom and wild beauty. In London when society demands appearance. Wherever and however makes you happy. Say yes and give me the privilege of loving you for the rest of my life." "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Malcolm. Yes to all of it. Yes to you." He kissed her then, proper distance forgotten, propriety surrendered to the joy of acceptance. Around them, roses bloomed and music played, and the world continued spinning, indifferent to the two people who had just promised their futures to each other. When they returned to the ballroom, announcement of their engagement was unnecessary. Their faces said everything, radiant with happiness that transcended scandal and social judgment. The Duchess of Hertford, a romantic despite her years, raised her glass in impromptu toast to the newly betrothed couple. Others followed, some reluctantly, others with genuine warmth. The Tun, having witnessed Philip's downfall and Evangeline's vindication, chose to view their match as romantic triumph rather than scandalous rebellion. Lady Victoria, confronted with her daughter's joy and Malcolm's evident devotion, found her disapproval softening despite herself. She would never approve entirely, her belief in social hierarchy too deeply ingrained. But seeing Evangeline glow with happiness she had never shown with Philip, even Lady Victoria could not maintain complete opposition. The wedding occurred 2 months later, a compromise between Malcolm's desire for immediate marriage and Lady Victoria's insistence on proper planning. They married in the small chapel on Malcolm's estate in the Highlands, a simple ceremony attended by family and close friends, rather than the elaborate London affair Lady Victoria would have preferred. Evangeline wore ivory silk, local wildflowers woven through her dark hair, Malcolm's mother's pearls at her throat. She carried no bouquet, her hands free to clasp Malcolm's as they exchanged vows that promised partnership and respect alongside traditional obedience. When Malcolm kissed his bride, the gathered witnesses cheered, and bagpipes played in celebration of the union. Anchored by mutual affection, the wedding breakfast was held in the great hall of Strathmore Castle, ancient stone walls decorated with Highland greenery and English roses. Evangeline's sisters danced Scottish reels with equal enthusiasm to English country dances, while Lord Harrington and Malcolm's steward discussed estate management with surprising accord. Even Lady Victoria was seen smiling as Malcolm's elderly aunt regaled her with stories of Highland life. As evening fell and guests began to retire, Malcolm took Evangeline's hand and led her to the tower room he had dedicated as her painting studio. The space was flooded with northern light during the day, perfect for her art. Easels stood ready, canvases stacked against walls, paints organized with a care that spoke of deep understanding of her passion. "I thought you might like a space entirely your own," Malcolm said, watching her explore the room with shining eyes. "Where you can create without anyone dictating subject or style, where your art can be yours alone." Evangeline turned to him, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "It is perfect." "You are perfect," he corrected, drawing her into his arms. "And I am the most fortunate man in Scotland, possibly all of Britain, to call you my wife." "Your wife," she repeated, testing the words. "Your partner, your equal." "My everything," Malcolm murmured against her hair. "My fierce, brave, extraordinary love." They stood together in the tower as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, Highland peaks silhouetted against the fading light. Below them, the celebration continued, but in that moment, they existed in a world of two, bound by promises and passion and the reckless courage of choosing love over acceptance. Years later, when their children asked how they met, Evangeline and Malcolm would smile at each other across the dinner table, sharing a look that held secrets and passion and enduring devotion. They would speak of gardens and fog and the moment they chose each other despite impossible odds. They would describe the scandal that nearly destroyed them and the love that proved stronger than society's judgment. But the story they told their children was sanitized, romantic, appropriate for young ears. The real story, the one they remembered in quiet moments alone, was written in stolen kisses and forbidden meetings, in courage that defied expectation, in the fierce certainty that some things are worth any price. Malcolm, who had sworn never to remarry after his first wife's death, met their mother at a ball in London and recognized in her the soul he had been searching for without knowing. Evangeline, facing a marriage she did not want, found the strength to choose her own path, to risk everything for the possibility of genuine happiness. For 7 years more, Evangeline devoted her time to painting and writing and teaching her granddaughters that courage matters more than acceptance, that love is worth fighting for, that choosing your own path may be terrifying, but the alternative is slow death of the spirit. She was buried beside Malcolm in the small chapel where they had married, beneath Highland skies, and next to the man who had loved her fiercely, completely, eternally. Their shared headstone bore no elaborate verse, merely their names and dates, and below, words that captured the essence of their union. They chose love. Their story became legend in the family, passed down through generations. The tale of a woman who defied an unwanted marriage, a man who paid her father's debts to give her freedom, a scandal that nearly destroyed them both, and a love that proved stronger than society's cruelest judgments. It was a story of courage and passion and the transformative power of choosing authenticity over acceptance. Their marriage thrived on mutual respect and genuine partnership, on passion that time deepened rather than diminished, on love that had been worth every moment of scandal and difficulty. That happiness mattered more than propriety, that two people willing to fight for each other could build something lasting and true. And in quiet moments, when Highland winds whispered through ancient stones and moonlight painted the tower where she once painted, those who believed in such things swore they could still feel it, the profound echo of a passion too powerful to be forgotten. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. If this story of courage and forbidden love touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who believes in choosing happiness over acceptance. Your support helps us continue creating stories of love, resilience, and hope that defy expectation.